Well, you guys, the day has finally come. After a couple of delays arriving about a year after its initial release window, Metal Gear Solid Delta has finally been released. The wait for this game has been crazy for Metal Gear fans, as the promise of a faithful remake of Metal Gear Solid 3, probably the fan favorite from the franchise, full of quality of life improvements and even new content, almost sounded too good to be true. It was so good, in fact, that the general response from the fanbase was a sort of cautious optimism. Fans were excited to be sure, but there were so many questions, like will they be able to truly recapture that old school Kojima magic? Will they be able to improve upon the gameplay without taking away from it? Will the changes end up ruining the game's original balance? All sorts of doubts started popping up almost immediately. But now that it's here, I've played a little over 30 hours over the course of about 3.5 playthroughs for this video, and I finally feel prepared to thoroughly answer all of those questions. And this is a really exciting one, because this is an incredibly special video for me. Easily the biggest series of videos that I've ever done on this channel, and the one that the majority of you watching probably already know me from, was the one I did last year playing every Metal Gear game ever released for the first time, and reviewing them from the perspective of a new player. This series was a ton of fun for me, made me into a huge Metal Gear fan, and like I just mentioned, allowed the majority of you watching to find this channel. And the only reason that series ever happened was because I saw the reveal trailer for Delta back in 2023 and told myself that this was the perfect opportunity to finally knock the Metal Gear games off the backlog. So even before it ever came out, Delta was a game that already kind of meant a lot to me, and finally being able to play and review it from the perspective of a huge Metal Gear fan feels almost surreal. So, has Metal Gear Solid Delta managed to remake MGS3 in a way that not only pays respects to the original creation, but also build upon it in a meaningful way? Well, you already read the title, but let's talk about it. Metal Gear Solid Delta Snake Eater is a remake of Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater for the PlayStation 2, developed in-house by Konami and released on August 28, 2025. And I should state right off the bat here that I won't really be reviewing MGS3 itself in this video, as I already did that about 1.5 years ago right here on the channel. Delta is an incredibly faithful remake, so the majority of my thoughts on the original still hold true here. So if you're looking to hear more about what I think of the game at the core of this experience, I'll have my video on that linked in the cards and in the description down below. But for those of you who are wondering specifically about whether or not this game is a good remake of it, this video will be more focused on what Delta does to differentiate itself from the original, and whether these changes and additions make the game better or take away from it. So to start, I feel like we have to talk about the visual overhaul they've given MGS3 here. It's been a whole 21 years since the original Metal Gear Solid 3's release, and Delta has taken full advantage of the newer graphics technology available to deliver a remake that is absolutely stunning. Now, it should be noted that as of writing this, the game is having some significant performance issues on literally every console it's been released for, including the PlayStation 5 Pro, and quite a few people are reporting performance issues on PC as well. But my experience with the game personally has been that I booted it up on PC after installing it, turned the settings to their absolute max, and the game ran at a stable 60 FPS with no crashes or game-breaking bugs. This could absolutely just be luck, or me having a pretty high-end rig, but hey, at least I was able to capture the game at a steady frame rate on its highest settings for the sake of the video. And while I'm sure that YouTube's compression is going to absolutely ruin a lot of the finer details, like it always does, I'll just take that win. Everything in this game has been lovingly recreated from the ground up, with new models, materials, lighting, and even an optional legacy filter if you prefer the color grading of the original PS2 release. They've even added a ton of small details that they absolutely did not need to, like how leaves or blades of grass now get stuck to Snake's clothes or hair after crawling through the brush, or how Snake's injuries are now reflected on his body throughout the entire game. And when I say the entire game, I mean it. Fresh wounds will be visible on his body during both gameplay and cutscenes, and major injuries will even leave permanent scars behind that will stay there for the duration of your playthrough. I was very skeptical when they were first marketing this feature and figured that they were just exaggerating, but after doing multiple playthroughs and seeing Snake fully shirtless at the end of them, you can definitely see just how different the scarring can be based on how I played. Snake has even had his animation work completely redone for this game, leading to things like transitioning between stances or picking up and dragging bodies looking much more smooth and believable here. His CQC attacks have also been reanimated, and they've even added a whole bunch of entirely new animations to just give the CQC a little more visual variety. And for fans of Big Boss and his trademark CQC techniques, these are an absolute treat, as they just look fantastic. All of this leads to a game that isn't just gorgeous to look at, but that's definitely one of the best looking games I've ever played. That being said though, not everything about the presentation in this game is perfect. Far from it, in fact. Something I noticed as soon as we were getting actual gameplay trailers for Delta was that the faces just felt a bit off. And now that we have the full game here and I've played through it multiple times, they still feel a bit weird. I feel like this is definitely because for most of the cast, they've tried to update the original models while still maintaining their iconic looks from the PS2 version, which has led to some faces that feel a little uncanny valley at times. Some characters have had some slight changes made though, like Ocelot's head shape being changed to better match his appearances later in the series, and Eva also being tweaked a little bit to look more like Big Mama than she did in the original. And some of the faces, like the bosses, just came out really well despite their adherence to the PS2 style, so it's pretty hit or miss across the board, just depending on who we're talking about. There are also some post-processing issues that are visible even at maximum settings, like the depth of field effect really not getting along with people's hair in this game, or the insane amount of ghosting present on things like the crocodile cap during gameplay. And since these are still present even on max settings, these are just issues with the implementation of these effects. So unless Konami actually patches these further down the line, they will always be present no matter what kind of hardware you throw at this game. And this one is admittedly a little bit nitpicky, but there's also a really weird audio mixing issue here where this game is generally really quiet even at full volume. But despite that, the pre-rendered cutscenes are really loud, like significantly louder than the entire rest of the game.
Just like the KGB to send something so beautiful, yet so deadly. During the last Great War, the most powerful men in America, China, and the Soviet Union had a secret pact. I have lost the Cobras, but I still have the Shagohod and the legacy.
I'm not really sure what happened here, but if anyone at Konami is watching this, could we maybe just lower the volume on these a little bit so they match the rest of the game? That would be great. So while the presentation might not be perfect, it is genuinely stellar most of the time, and it's an absolute treat to see this game get such a high quality makeover. And for fans who are worried about the story of the game potentially being messed with, well, don't. Because in case you haven't already noticed, it's almost entirely unchanged outside of the visual overhaul. 99.9% of this game's dialogue is just reused from the PS2 version, and every single bit of the cutscenes have been lovingly recreated shot for shot, with most scenes even reusing the original's mocap data and just applying it to these new models. And that might sound lazy, but take it from someone who worked in game dev for a bit before going full-time on YouTube. Making a full new set of character models with skeletons that are capable of reusing animations from over 20 years ago, while also adding new joints and points of articulation, and having all of it just look natural, is not an easy task in the slightest. Now, there have been some little touches made here and there in the game's cutscenes, but all of these slight tweaks are, in my opinion, for the better, and absolutely come from a deep reverence for the source material. Things like how they've made it actually rain blood in that one scene where the boss says it's raining blood, rather than just having it be normal rain like in the original, or tweaking a couple things about Volgan's death scene to make it visually match what we saw the Burning Man look like in MGS5. These are great little touches and bits of attention to detail that you'll see throughout the entire game, and in my opinion, they do make the game ever so slightly better for being there. But of course, there is one downside as it pertains to dialogue and story presentation, and that's the fact that they did in fact re-record some lines. Now, don't freak out just yet, because they did get all of the original voice actors back to record these, and there are 0 re-recorded lines in the cutscenes. All of the new recordings are only ever present in the codec conversations, and mostly pertain to tutorial stuff. But of course, there's a reason I'm bringing them up, and that's because, for whatever reason, these are mixed horribly. Like, they're laughably bad. And I mean that literally, because when I heard one of these on stream on launch day, I actually burst out laughing at how much it sounded like a YouTube poop video from the late 2000s.
In the survival viewer, choose weapon from the backpack. Your available weapons will be displayed in a list on the screen.
I'm genuinely baffled by the fact that these made it into the full release of the game, but at the very least, they only pop up on rare occasions, and don't really affect the experience with the game much, outside of just being really damn funny. So overall, the presentation isn't perfect in Delta, but it's way more positive than negative. I mean, you know it has to be good when the only complaints that I can find to bring up are the faces being too faithful to the original and a handful of weirdly mixed lines of dialogue. Now, when it comes to actually playing the game, the numerous changes and additions that Delta makes to the original are apparent even from the main menu. When you start up a playthrough, they've added a ton of new options for the "how experienced with Metal Gear are you" question. They still have the options of "I like MGS 1, 2, 3, or I'm playing for the first time," but they've also added a bunch of new options for MGS 4, Peace Walker, MGS 5, and even one for being a huge fan of all of the mainline games, which just put a huge smile on my face before I even started my first playthrough. After that question though, you'll be presented with the new and easily most significant choice when starting a new game. Do you want to play with the new style or the legacy style? And while you might assume that these are simple differences between the camera perspective, like what the subsistence release of MGS3 had, these two options actually offer totally different experiences with the game. So for the sake of this review, I went out of my way to do one full playthrough in the new style and one full playthrough in the legacy style so that we could cover them both in depth here. The new style is exactly that, new. This is the true remake experience of Metal Gear Solid Delta. It uses a much improved version of the third-person camera from the subsistence release that now controls and looks much more natural than the original. Because let's be honest, the third-person perspective in the original was kinda just thrown in as an addition to the re-release because a lot of people didn't love the fixed camera perspective in that game, and you can kind of feel how haphazardly it was thrown in. But like I said before, if you think that these two modes are a simple change in perspective, you're in for a pretty big shock with Delta. See, the new style also features a totally new control scheme that's designed to make the game easier to pick up for new players, with pretty standard shooter bindings like circle to crouch, using the triggers to aim and fire, pretty much the same controls that you'd expect from any other third-person shooter. They've also added the over-the-shoulder aiming that was originally introduced to the series by MGS4, allowing for quicker and smoother shots in this perspective, but at the cost of some of your accuracy. And the first-person aiming is still here and allows you to get perfectly accurate shots just like normal. But if you're looking for something that lets you quickly aim and shoot while you're on the move, the new over-the-shoulder shooting feels pretty damn good. And that's only the first new mechanic that's been added with this style, as they've also introduced crouch walking to MGS3, which was coincidentally also first introduced in MGS4. This gives a really nice middle ground between running and crawling, as always needing to choose between moving at a solid speed but being visible from a mile away, or crawling to reduce your visibility but moving at a snail's pace as a result, was pretty annoying in the original. And while I was definitely worried that introducing a crouch walk into MGS3 would totally destroy the pacing and balance of the original, it actually feels balanced very well by just the fact that the camo system exists, meaning you'll still be pretty visible from good distances if you choose to sneak around by crouching rather than crawling, as you'll just get less concealment when using the crouch walk. You're still less visible than if you were running around, of course, but not as much as you might think initially. So much like the third-person aiming, it actually feels like a very natural inclusion that doesn't break the balance of things at all. And probably the most minor mechanical addition of them all, but one that's still definitely worth mentioning, is that you can now reload your gun, complete with a full reload animation, simply by pressing square on the controller. You're no longer required to do the tactical reload or just wait until your magazine is empty to reload it. There's just a handy little button for it now. The tactical reload trick does still work though, and is considerably faster since you don't need to wait for the animation. So for you experienced players out there, you're still going to be rewarded for some of that legacy knowledge. But easily the most interesting part of this new style is the rebalancing they've done within this mode. There's a ton of very minor adjustments that have been made to make the style feel fresh, while still feeling faithful to the original experience. But easily the most interesting of all to me is the addition of bullet drop and travel time for your weapons, which is by far the most noticeable on the tranq pistol, so I'm going to use it for all of my clips here while showcasing what I'm talking about. This is a balancing change that's been made to account for the third-person aiming, allowing players to aim and shoot more quickly, but requiring more skillful shots from players who try to do so at longer ranges. Like I said, there are physics on the bullets in this game now, and you can easily see that right here with the tranq darts as they move very slowly and drop to the ground pretty quickly, forcing players to take the distance between them and the enemy and the travel time into account before actually firing. And that's not even mentioning that if you end up missing a shot by failing to do so, you're going to have to try again, not only using more ammo, but also burning through your suppressor durability way faster than you would have in the original. And in my opinion, this is an amazing change, as the tranquilizer guns have always been incredibly overpowered in the Metal Gear games, despite the fact that the non-lethal playstyle is meant to be the more difficult approach to playing them. This one change brings both of the tranquilizer guns in this game into check a little more, and demands more skillful play from the players to use them efficiently. All up though, this new style does a really good job of updating MGS3, but without taking away from or deviating from the feel of the original. For those of you looking for a more authentic experience though, there's the Legacy style. This allows you to play the game pretty much exactly as you remember it from the original Snake Eater release. It gives you the game's original fixed camera perspective from the PS2 release, the original HUD elements and layout, and even a filter over the top of the image that makes the color grading look more accurate to the PS2 original. The controls have also been changed in this style to be similar to the PS2 version, but it should be noted that some of the new mechanics like crouch walking and manually reloading your weapons still exist in this style for some reason. You can easily just ignore these additions if you want. Like, I personally didn't use crouch walking at all during my Legacy style playthrough so that I could get a closer experience to the original, but it should be noted that there are some elements present in this style that aren't completely faithful. There are even some awesome little touches here, like how you'll see the PS2 intro movie instead of the new one that they made for the remake at the start of the game, and how when you go back to the main menu after playing in the Legacy style, it will actually change from the new menu screen to the original from the PS2 version. So if you're not a big fan of the changes made to the new style, or you're just looking to basically play the original game with a substantial makeover, then the Legacy style is definitely for you. After having played the game in its entirety in both styles, I genuinely really enjoyed both of them. Obviously, Legacy style isn't really anything new, but it's nice to see those classic camera angles and original gameplay getting such a nice visual lift. And when I'm looking for something a little more modern, the new style legitimately makes MGS3 feel like a game that could have come out for the first time this year. So both of them are genuinely really enjoyable in their own distinct ways, and I'll likely be replaying the game in both styles over time, as I just can't choose which one I prefer. But with the playstyles covered, now we can just talk about the more general changes that have been made to the gameplay overall. Every change that I've mentioned up to this point was specific to one style or the other, but from this point on, these are things that apply to the entire game. And for the most part, these are just simple quality of life improvements, like how you can now pick up and drag bodies without unequipping your weapon first like in the original, which, while a super small change, is a very welcome one. Much more impactful, though, are all of the little updates that they've made to the survival viewer. Back when I first played MGS3 for the channel, almost 2 years ago, the survival viewer was one of my biggest complaints with the game. Not because of the idea behind it, but because of how much it disrupted the flow of the gameplay to have to pause and navigate all these menus so often. Here in Delta though, they've massively improved nearly every single aspect of it through a handful of surgical quality of life updates. The first of these, and probably the most significant one, is that they've added a new contextual quick camo menu to the game. This can be opened at any time during gameplay by holding up on the D-pad, and gives you a selection of camo combinations to quickly select and swap to without needing to actually pause the game. And these combinations are simply chosen by storing what camos you've used up to that point. So instead of scrolling through presets selected by the devs, you're actually scrolling through all of the combinations that you've already put together earlier in your playthrough. This doesn't entirely fix the camo menu from the original, as you still have to use it to create these combinations in the first place, but it does massively cut down on the amount of times that you'll have to go back into the full menu and scroll through the list of every camo in the game to find the one that you're looking for. So it's a huge improvement to the camo system overall. And the codec has actually been given the same treatment, with players simply needing to hold down on the D-pad to open up the new codec menu and quickly call whichever frequency they want. They've also added these new shortcuts that will pop up on the side of the screen at specific times to take you to certain parts of the survival viewer that you might want to go into at that specific moment. So if you find a new weapon or piece of equipment while playing, you'll get a quick little prompt and you can simply press a single button on the controller to go straight to your backpack to equip it. Or if you sustain a major injury, a shortcut will pop up then too that takes you straight into the cure menu so you can treat that injury quickly. This might sound like I'm making a big deal out of a really minor change, but it's seriously hard to explain just how much these contextual shortcuts preserve the flow of the gameplay and help the pace of the game overall as a result. So while you do still have to navigate menus a good bit in this game, they've really cut down on the time spent in said menus compared to the original, which I appreciated a lot during my time with the game. And we still haven't even talked about the new content that's been added. One that they advertised quite a bit before the release of the game was the addition of the new Gakko collectibles. These little camouflage ducks can be found all over the game, with one of them being hidden in every single map, much like the Keratons from the original MGS3. And for those of you who are worried about them potentially being gone, don't worry, they're still here too. Much like with the Keratons, there's a pretty awesome endgame reward waiting for you if you manage to find every single one of them. And you don't even need a guide to find all of these guys anymore like you did in the original, because they've added a little element to the pause menu showing you how many Keratons and Gakkos you've collected, as well as having a little checkbox above their heads to tell you if you found the one in the current map you're in or not. This makes the collectible hunting really fun to do on your own this time, and I had a bunch of people in my stream chats telling me about just how much of a blast they had hunting for them without a guide. So I know that it's not just me who found this to be a great change/addition. Something that they did not advertise at all though, despite the fact that they absolutely should have, is the fact that not only has the nightmare sequence from the original returned here, but it's actually been totally remade from the ground up. And not even just that, but this remade nightmare sequence for Delta was actually made by Platinum Games, the legendary action game studio responsible for things like Bayonetta, Vanquish, and even Metal Gear Rising. They did a fantastic job with it too. Like, this genuinely just needs to be an entire game of its own. It looks awesome, has a killer atmosphere, plays shockingly well for a little minigame that most players won't even find, and by the time that you reach the end of the 5 minutes or so that it goes on for, you're just left wanting more of it. So please, Platinum Games, Konami, if something like that would be realistically possible, I'm begging for you to make it happen. At the very least though, once you've found it in the main game, it is just playable from the main menu as a piece of bonus content, so you can just go and play it whenever you want once you've triggered the Easter egg. And that brings us to one of the greatest strengths of Delta, that being that all of the original bonus content from MGS3 is still here, plus more that they've added onto it. You've got the Nightmare minigame, the Carotons, the new Gakkos, and I haven't mentioned it yet, but Snake vs. Monkey has also been remade here, or if you're playing on Xbox, they've even gone to the lengths of making you a whole new Snake vs. Bomberman minigame, which has been made into a whole new thing because Sony still doesn't want the Ape Escape IP to have a presence on Xbox, so instead of just cutting the minigame altogether, they actually went to the lengths of making those players a whole new minigame to experience. So in terms of the bonus content, Delta is actually the most complete release of Metal Gear Solid 3 that we've ever gotten, which is kind of insane given just how many releases MGS3 has had over the years, and the very storied history of certain pieces of bonus content being available in this version but not in that version. In the interest of wrapping things up before we go on for too long though, I really enjoyed my time with Metal Gear Solid Delta, like way more than I was expecting to pre-release. I had expected Delta to play things much more safely than it did, and while this is still an incredibly faithful remake of the original MGS3, it took some much more bold jumps than expected, and the result is a product that genuinely feels really different from the PS2 version in spite of all their similarities. The game is essentially just Metal Gear Solid 3, but with more variety between playstyles, some new mechanics, more things for completionists and players who play the game over and over again to do, and with most of my major issues from the original either being made much less annoying, or just being fixed entirely with the number of quality of life adjustments that have been made. Now, that's not to say that everything is fixed, as the alert system is still kind of wonky and nowhere near as interesting as Metal Gear Solid 2's, and some things in the survival viewer can still break the pace of the game at times, but most of my smaller hangups with the game have been massively improved upon here. And despite that and the totally complete package that Delta offers, I don't necessarily want to say that this is the definitive version of Metal Gear Solid 3. As I don't feel like Delta existing suddenly invalidates any reason to go back and play the original, but I really do want to emphasize that this is the complete MGS3 package. If you're a fan of the original, this will give you that same experience you already loved, just with slightly more polish and better visuals. And if you're a new fan looking to play the game for the first time, Delta makes it easier than ever to pick it up and enjoy it. It's genuinely kind of a miracle that Konami was able to pull off a remake of such a beloved title the way that they did here, especially considering that this is the first game they've developed in-house since Metal Gear Survive. And if they were possibly interested in remaking some other titles from the series after this, like the original 2D entries maybe, I would certainly be more open to the idea now that I've seen what this new team can really do. So at the end of the day, I'm going to give Metal Gear Solid Delta Snake Eater a 9.4 out of 10. Hey guys, thanks for making it to the end of another 30-minute ramble session. I hope you guys enjoyed, and if you did, feel free to leave a like, a comment, a sub, just anything to help out with that whole YouTube algorithm thing. It really goes a long way, and I appreciate it a ton. And as always, a huge thank you to the channel members and patrons who allow for me to do things like just drop all of my other videos and binge the shit out of a new Metal Gear game for 2 weeks and then just upload a random video talking about it. And if you're looking to join this amazing group of people who make videos like this one possible, feel free to check out the links in the description below or on the screen at the end of the video to see more information about it. But with all that being said, I'm going to let you guys go and just patiently wait for my next chance to talk about Metal Gear on the channel. So once again, I hope you guys enjoyed, and I hope to see all of you back here for the next video. Have a great rest of your day, and goodbye for now.